Okay, sorry for the late start. A reminder from the top of the class, I will be on sabbatical next week, which means we will not be having class for a few weeks. And I have the yes, it's for a month plus. We come back on a Thursday. The next class will be on January 22nd for the Mishnah. Now the Thursday class, that will be on the 16th. So that'll be the week earlier. The Thursday class will resume, and I have the Thursday class tomorrow night as well.
So what about the January 22nd when you come back
yes.
to our class? We do an after-camp break from this and Mishnah related to Bishvat. For that day to study something related to the holiday.
Let's finish up the Mishnah class for today, and then when we stop, we can discuss as we're closing up the building if we want to do something special.
Yeah.
But I think you'll be disappointed that Tu B'Shvat, I'm assuming. Tu B'Shvat.
Yeah.
It's very botanical. the whole Kabbalistic Seder, that is only 500 years old, right? That's like brand new. It's a baby. So there's not a lot in the Mishnah other than which plant was planted when and which plant was planted when.
That's why it's appropriate for just one class.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure.
Is Orla, right?
What? It's for counting the years of a plant before you can then eat from the fruit-bearing plants. All right, but let's get down to Bava Batra, chapter 4. And it's very good that we have a real estate agent in the room because we are talking real estate, and I'm actually fascinated to find out what is similar between American law and Jewish law when you're buying a house. So we'll start on the left, and we'll go around, if you don't mind, Richard.
Oh, I fully don't mind. If a man sold a house and he has not sold its side chambers, even though they open into the house, nor the room that is behind the house, nor the roof, it is a railing more than 10 handbreadths there.
Okay.
I'm sorry, if it has railing.
If it has, right. Okay, so what are we talking about here? We're talking about buying a house, right? So here is my house. And I say I buy the house. What's included in that purchase? Right? Do I buy the little extra room that's on the side? Did I buy the roof if there is a railing around the top? And the technical answer is, so far, no, right? You didn't buy the side building, even if it has an opening into it. Now, if it was part of the house and designated as part of the house, then yes, you did. But if it was designated as, oh, and this is an extra building, even if it has a door coming in, it's an extra building, and therefore it's not part of the house. The roof is a usable space. So if there is a railing across the top, when I sell you the house, I'm not selling you the roof. I'm just selling you the inside house. Yeah, okay. So we have more mixed property issues in biblical, in the rabbinic law than we do in modern law. In modern law, this I'm guessing would not fly.
No.
Right. In modern law, you sell a piece of property.
Also, you sell the air and the land.
But you can reserve mineral rights when you sell things.
No, yeah, but your house, if you
for your house, no.
In your house,
yeah,
in your backyard, you found oil,
right, or gold,
it's yours.
Yeah, the previous owner can't say I didn't sell that.
No, and also the air is yours over the house.
That's why I own the birds. Exactly. Okay, so basically, what this is saying is, if you sell the house, you only sell the minimum definition of house. You don't sell the other things that you might think are part of the building. You only sell the minimum definition of house. Onward.
Further, Rabbi Yehuda says, if the roof has an entrance shaped like a door, even if the railing is not 10 breadths high, even if the railing is not 10 handbreadths high, it is not sold.
All right, so let's imagine there is a little doorway at the top of the roof to get onto the roof. If there's a door, it's a separate area. It's a separate zone. It is a separate building in their conception. And therefore, even if the railing doesn't make it look clear, it still is clear a different place, because otherwise, why is there a door? All right, now, we're going to see later on that there are magic words you can say to avoid this confusion.
So what happened if the roof has a wall around and connected with the door? Can you say that's part of another room of the house? So in this way, the roof become to be a part of the house.
By default, it wouldn't be the house, right? Unless you actually claim this is the house, and both the purchaser and the seller agree on that is what the house is, which is what we're going to find out later on, that there are ways to say this where you can avoid the confusion. But what they're talking about is in areas where you have no contract, where you have no witnesses to any other statements. You only have a witness saying, I'm buying the house. Great, I'm selling the house. How much is it? It's 100. I'll take 100. You exchange the money, you exchange the property, and then one guy says, good, I'm moving into the side building, right? You go to the court, and the court says, well, did they say anything about the side building? No. Right? Did they talk about the roof? No. What did they say? They said, I'm selling the house. I'm buying the house. Okay, if that's what they said, we have to interpret it in the minimal way possible.
So the garage is a site.
It depends on the definition of what considers to be an ancillary
No,
building.
garage means everything that, because it's a building that is next to the house, that sometimes they have a door, a common door.
Or they can be up in the back.
Yeah.
So there are in our modern world, we don't tend to have that many extra buildings that are around our property because most of us aren't farmers. But the idea that you might have an additional shed, that you might have an additional storage room or something like that, that's really what they're talking about. It's not a living space. It's not actually a house space. It's just a building that's connected to the house. And that isn't house.
So it's independent. Also,
It's,
they have,
by default, it's
by
independent.
default, also, they have a door that connected with the main house.
Even with the door connecting it, it's still not considered part of the
So
house.
why- But it's a logic. If you follow all the logic from the last week,
Right.
about what you see and what happened in the common area,
Right?
why someone would like to have a door that go from this place to the other private house without any separation? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, because they
If
can,
you follow the same rule of the
you can close the door, right? You can make it so that's your storage shed and this is my house. Now, why would someone buy it on the minimal? Why are the rabbis actually believing it's possible that a person, remember, they're not saying it's probable. They're not saying this is the common way to sell real estate. They're saying, is it possible to interpret it this way? And what they're trying to say is it's possible to interpret it this way because maybe the buyer wanted to buy the smallest unit possible because that would be cheaper, right? And they didn't want the side room. They didn't care about the roof. They just wanted a good price for the smallest house area that they could. And so that's what they bought. And if the seller had thought they wanted to buy everything else, they would have charged more, which is why it comes back to the idea that the court does not want to take away property from the rightful owner, right? Until I sell the house or the extra pieces, I own it. If the court wants me to give it to someone else without having been paid, that's called stealing. And the court is not allowed to steal from people, even if they think it's logical. Now, how do you avoid this? You have better statements, you have better witnesses. We're going to see more of that as we go on. And not small print, big print. Big print, yes.
This 10 handbreadths thing, it comes up a lot. The
Yes.
10 handbreadth, and I think 10 handbreadths is even the 10 handbreadth ties where it's no longer public domain and everything, right?
For many different things, right? So 10 tefachim, 10 handbreadths is a standard measurement of height to mean significant, right? So 10 handbreadths, for example, is the minimum size for a sukkah, which is about a yard, give or take, about 30 inches. So that about a meter for those of you who are on the metric system. A little bit less than a meter. That's considered to be, a reasonable barrier, or a reasonable structure that you would actually use for something, which I believe is very much just a practical measure. That, that's about right? That's a small little wall, and if I had a wall here and I had, sheep over there, that would be significant enough to tell you these are my sheep, and hands off. So that's why it's used as a default measure for significant but small structure. Make sense? Okay. 4-2. It's on the back side. Yep. We're continuing about the selling of the house.
North versus north?
Nor, yes.
Okay. What has he sold the cistern of the seller, even though he had written in the deed of sale the depth and height.
Okay, so you've got your basement, right, which sometimes was under the house or sometimes would be like attached to the house on the side. You got your cistern, which is like a type of well that we talked about, just not where water's coming up, but you fill it with water, or the rainwater, others there, and then you can use water out of it throughout the year, right? That's not part of the house. When you say depth and height, what you're saying is that, right? The height and depth of the house.
But if you take the system from the cell of the house will not have any water, so it's
So you have to go to the river to get your water. Welcome to the ancient world.
Yeah, but
Not
no,
everyone. Not everyone had plumbing.
I know, but I have a problem with that minimalist concept, because for me the approach is being Rosh Katan.
Right.
That really, like, come on, like it's common sense that there's some stuff that are part of the house because it's part of the dynamic of the house, the structure of the house.
The roof. My
no.
problem is the roof.
The ceiling, yes, but not the roof. Right. The inside, of course, but not the above side. The roof was a usable space in the ancient world. People would use it to dry food. They would use it to smoke things, and yeah.
So how are you planning to go to the roof if the house is not yours and you cannot go inside?
I got a ladder.
But you need to ask permission to the owner of the house.
Okay.
You know?
Hold on. So let's talk about trespass, right? That's the next section. Am I allowed to walk on your property if I sold the property to you? All right.
I don't like that.
Okay.
You have to be very
Okay.
specific.
So question on part one before we get to the path.
It seems like they're just selling the house and not so much the property around it, from what I'm reading here.
Absolutely.
Because later it talks about a courtyard and a
Right.
town.
Because what did you say you were buying?
Just the structure. So that,
No, I didn't say structure. I said I'm buying a house.
which is,
What is a house? A house is a space that I live in.
Four walls and the roof.
That not even four, it could be three, right? Right? And not a roof, but a ceiling, right? This is what I live in. I live in a house. It's a living space, right? So the rabbis are very, very careful that because I know you guys are very interested in what's logical, but they are very careful that they do not want to take anything unlawfully from anyone. And if you only said house, you only can claim a house.
So they try to play it safe in the definition.
Well, it's not just play it safe, it's play it legal, right? Remember, the rabbis are interpreting laws from the Torah, but one of the biggest laws in the Torah is thou shalt not steal. And therefore, the rabbis have to be very careful that when they are moving property from one owner's possession to another's because of the court case, that when they do that, they are not incorrectly taking from one person and giving it to another.
as I say, my reading of this seems like it has a lot to do with what was part of what it would be is the standard of the time and what would house mean. Like today, house means, building and yard.
Okay, so
And then in there, it seems like it.
if we make a little more progress, we're going to get into what a definition might mean in a community. And we'll get to that eventually. And we're also going to get some pushback on being, as you put it, narrow-minded and this nitpickiness. We're going to get a little bit of pushback around that as well.
And I think that if I can differentiate mathematically between the concept, I think that they were thinking more as a volume, and we think more as an area.
Or as a unit.
A unit or area.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that's a difference. For us, it's the area, meaning the area is the land. For them, was the volume, meaning it's just the cubic.
Right.
Okay, the house, done. So I think that's the difference in approaches, maybe.
So yes, I mean, think of it, maybe let's not use the word house. Let's use the term living space, right? If I buy living space in an apartment building, do I own the stairwell? Do I own the elevator? Do I own the lobby?
It's a common area. Indirectly, yes, by the HOA.
But so if there's somebody slips and falls in the lobby, do they sue me for if I left if they're not
the building,
not me,
and then you need to have insurance. If you're responsible.
But I, the owner of apartment 2A, I'm not the one the insurance company is going to come after. Trust me,
Yes.
but they're not coming after me. My name is not on the title. My name is not on the deed. My name is not going to be in the court case, even because I only own my little box. I don't own the ceiling of a roof above it. Right? I don't own the equipment outside of it. I own my little box. And that's the way to really conceive of what is a house, which it's also good to think about. As Yerach said, what is a house? It's a house where a place where you get to sleep. A house is just your little space. It may be big, it may be small, but the basic function is this is where you are able to live. And all these other things are nice, but that isn't actually what makes a house a house. Right? Certainly it's not what makes a house a home. Okay, part 2, otherwise we're...
What makes a house is love.
I was going to say, I thought you were going to say what makes a house is a good real estate agent.
And he, the seller, must buy himself a path from the new owner to reach the cellar or the cistern, according to Rabbi Akiva.
Okay, according to Rabbi Akiva. All right, go ahead and read what the sages.
But the sage says he need not buy himself a path.
Okay, so here's the question. If you bought the house, but you didn't buy the cistern, the well, and I'm the owner, how do I get to it? Right? Because, which color am I on? Right. So if you own
You need to buy
the area,
a piece of land to walk from one place to the other.
right, I need my path to be able to get to it.
Mhm.
Right? So Rabbi Akiva says that you do have to buy a path. Right? You, the seller, after I sold you the house, I then have to buy permission from you to be able to get to the others of the house that I didn't sell you. Are you all following that?
Mhm.
Right? That's what Rabbi Akiva says. The sages, the Chachamim, say, no, you don't need to do this. Now, what is the interpretation here? So the interpretation here, at least as far as the Gemara is concerned and other commentators, is Rabbi Akiva is saying, look, when you sell everything except for what would not be sold. So what is everything? Everything is going to be the house and the land the house sits on, including the path. What the sages say is when you sell, you're going to hold back everything possible. And therefore, what are you holding back? You would be mentally holding back, but I get a path.
So Rabbi Akiva think like a modern person.
Yeah.
And they said they thought that as a person and different.
They felt as narrow as possible.
Yes.
Right. Rabbi Akiva wins.
Really?
Yep.
Usually
Oh.
they say this way.
I know. That's why I thought you'd be surprised. Right? Rabbi Akiva wins. But now, so this is one of those places where we talked about Machmir and Mekil, about
But
being.
this is against the Mishnah 1, right?
I know. The individuals are allowed to win from time to time, right? So, and Rabbi Akiva is the one who often wins most. But here's the issue where you can't just say he is strict or they are strict. They are each being strict in their own way. Rabbi Akiva is being strict in the idea that mentally, when you sell, you assume that you're selling all of the basic things. And therefore, the buyer now owns it, and you don't have the right to take anything back. Whereas the sages say, no, we're going to be strict that you only sell what you say you sell. And if you know that you're going to keep this, you would never have sold that because, of course, you'd still want it. And therefore, you still own it because it was never said explicitly. So they're being strict on the rights of the owner, the original owner, and Rabbi Akiva is being strict on the rights of the new owner. But what based on the unspoken intention that is assumed to be in the mind of the owner, the original owner. Now, how do you fix all this? You speak your intentions. You make a good contract, you make it clear, and everything is then understood.
You
But-
need a good realtor.
Exactly. But they're arguing about cases where that didn't happen. Remember, we're always dealing with cases here where when it gets to court, if you do it right, you never end up in court.
But Rabbi, there's still a contradiction between Mishnah 1 and Mishnah 2.
Mhm.
Because Mishnah 1, they say that only the building and minimalist aspect. In Mishnah 2, if Rabbi Akiva
Right.
won, he has more a maximalist aspect.
He's saying the house and its land, right? Whatever the land is with the house, but not the items on that land.
Well, but it's not just the house as the Mishnah one.
But land is considered different than the additional items, right? So that distinction, and we're going to get that in more Mishnayot here in a second, the distinction between what's included with this piece of land and what isn't included with the land, what's included with the house, what isn't included with the house, that is going to be the subject of the next few Mishnayot. But there's a special exception that's going to go into Rabbi Akiva's argument here.
And Rabbi Akiva agrees that if he had said to him, expecting the cisterns or cells, that he need not to buy himself a path. If he sold them, the cellar or the cisterns, to another, Rabbi Akiva says he needs not buy himself a path, but the sage says he must buy himself a path.
Okay, so if he says, I'm going to sell you the house, but not the cistern and cellar, then he doesn't have to buy himself a path. Because,
Again, sorry, what?
okay, if he says, I'm going to sell you the house, but not the cistern or the cellar, then I don't have to buy a path, because when I made it explicit and very, very clear that I was not selling these things,
You cannot use.
then clearly I would have been reserving my right to be able to follow a path to get to them,
Yeah.
right? So therefore, I must have been reserving them, and I don't have to pay you for access to get back to my stuff, because that was what I said very clearly. However, if he sold the cellar or cistern to another person, right? He keeps the house, but he sells the cellar and cistern to someone else, right? So it's reversed, exactly. It's 180 degrees from what was before, right? I'm keeping the house, but I'm selling the other stuff. Whereas before we sold the house, but kept the other stuff. So I'm keeping the house and I'm getting the other stuff. So then I don't have to, that doesn't have to buy a path in that space either. It's not required because it was assumed in that transaction. See?
But the new buyer need to buy the path.
Yeah, the new buyer, yes.
No, means the second new buyer.
Yes, the person that you sold the cistern
and
to,
the basement.
Exactly.
They need to pay to the.
he does not. So Rabbi Akiva's position, right? So Rabbi Akiva sells, hold on, we're going to change colors here, right? Rabbi Akiva decides to sell this to Mr. Blue, right? Mr. Blue gets a free path. It's built in. When I sold you the cistern and cellar, I was obviously selling you a route to get to them. Because if you didn't have a route to get to them, what were you buying? Right? Were you going to like just hover over the top of the property?
It's true, because if not, the owner of the house can say, I don't want to sell you the path.
But the sages, the Chachamim, say, nope, you actually have to buy yourself a path.
And what having the other refuse?
Or puts a
Sell.
ridiculous price on it, then you should have made a better contract. But there again, they're trying to be strict. They're trying to be very strict on interpreting the words of the sale.
Who won the second part?
Akiva.
Also
Yeah.
both parts of it.
Yeah, Akiva's.
Yeah, because that doesn't make any sense, because the other one can
It does.
ask you any sum that they want or
It-
refuse, and what do you do?
It does and
You
it
cannot
doesn't.
sell.
It does and it doesn't make sense, right? Because it doesn't make sense if there's no way to fix this. But it makes sense if you can prevent it from happening by being clear in your speech and clear in your dealings. Right? What the rabbis were most worried about wasn't people hovering to get to the well. What they were worried about is that people would make bad worded contracts, that they would make deals that didn't say what they actually meant to say. Now, speaking with a lawyer in the room, one of the biggest criticisms of lawyers is that you guys use too many words and that the words are all weird and technical and all of that, right? Now, why do you guys use so many words and why do you use all these technical phrases?
They try, no.
To charge more? Yeah, no.
They
For
try
time.
they try to cover everything, and usually they're pretty one-sided contracts. So.
Exactly. Let me use that, right? So, because the lawyers are trying to make everything clear. They're trying to cover all the issues so that there isn't any of these questions, right? That's how modern law works as well. The idea is not let's fix it at the court. The idea is let's fix it with the contract to begin with, and then we don't end up in court.
But you know that the position of the sages is terrible. Because, no, but listen to this case, okay? I sell only the house. Perfect. So the owner has only the house, okay, by the
Right.
section. So if they, I now I'm own only the cistern, the
Cellar,
store,
right.
whatever. But the land is the
The
owner of
new
the
owner,
house.
right.
It's the house.
The buyers.
Yes. So I want to sell my cistern and my base, but the other person can need to buy
The right of way.
from them the right for path. And the other side, no, I don't allow. So what can I do? Now I cannot sell it. I'm stuck. And they say, well, I have a solution for you. I buy you the system and the store for half price.
Yeah.
If not, you stuck with that because you never will use it. That's a terrible situation that can bring the society.
So what's the alternative? Hold on. Make sure you understand the alternative before you say this is a problem. All right. So, well, I mean, first of all, the alternative is you never make a stupid sale. You make a smart and use your good contract. But the other alternative is I said I sold my house. I thought it meant the house plus this plus that. But the buyer says, well, I thought it meant the house plus this plus that. If you don't have a minimalist interpretation to some degree, then you get into a huge argument about what it does or doesn't actually include. And yes, that will also break your society. Because now every single sale is an argument about what was actually included in that sale. So the best solution, of course, is to have everything be clear. But in the minimum, the rabbis are making a very good sense. And Rabbi Akiva is only making a deviation from the other sages with regards to the path. Right? With the rest of it, he's in agreement.
Rabbi, I think most law today is there's like an implied meaning to what stuff means. So when you what the implied minimum set of goods.
And the rabbis do understand that there is also a common usage or cultural interpretation, but they want to avoid that as much as possible because the rabbis also knew that people lived in many different cultures and often would travel between the different cultures. Right? There were different rules from the Judean desert than there were up in the Galilee even. So even within the state of Israel, the modern state of Israel's territory, there were disagreements about what counted as normal. So they are trying to establish a baseline before they get into the other details.
So not to get too far off topic, then later on in the 1200s or even the Middle Ages,
Right.
did this have any effect between the tradings between the Jewish people? Because I know they were known for trading between the two communities. So did they have like a common?
So among Jews, this was absolutely vital, right? So if you had Jews who were selling wool from that had come in from England, it was picked up in France and dyed or woven, and they were selling that wool in Egypt or selling it on in the Arabian area to Jews there, the Jews in Egypt and the Jews in France were speaking the same language of how to do business. And that is one of the things that allowed them to be so competitive.
Globalization.
What? Well, it's not just globalization. It's when you remove the barriers to trade, right? When you lower the transaction costs, that's the term. When you lower the transaction costs by agreeing upon mutually acceptable rules that are enforceable, and therefore you can trust the other person, that allows your trade to be done more cheaply than your competitors. And so the Jews did have an advantage in that because the Jews around the Mediterranean basin were all using this. So even if they had different ideas of stuff in Egypt than what was going on in France, when it came time for doing business, because they were using the same Mishnah and Talmud and Halakha, that gave them a big edge. Eventually, of course, the Europeans take that over and they put in their own rules and they treat themselves preferentially, and that drives the Jews out of the market. But for a while, it really was quite helpful for the Jewish merchants in that area. Okay, 4.3. Can't believe we're only 2 Mishnahs in. Yes, it is you.
If a man
Yeah,
If a man sold a house, he has sold also the door, but not the key.
All right, now.
Wow.
Okay. I knew this was going to get a response. Okay. So first of all, keys back then were a bigger deal than keys now. Have you ever gone to an old time blacksmith and you see the big iron keys, right? They're not just the tiny little, if I had 1,000 years ago, if I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, oh my God, if I had 10 keys right? It would be like something out of the old movies of a giant iron key ring. So keys matter. They were a big deal. And they're also movable property, right? They're also considered to be movable property, not real estate. And so if I buy your house, am I buying the pictures on the wall? No.
You can.
You can. If it's explicit in the contract, you can. But I'm not buying the movable property, even if that movable property is attached to the building, like a picture on a wall, right? So keys were not considered to be part of the door. You can get a new key made, or you can put a new lock on.
No, the keys are part of the property.
In the modern world, yes. In the modern world, we would never imagine selling a house without,
The key.
the key. However, how many people in the modern world, when you buy a new house, change the locks?
Almost everyone.
You should, right?
Yeah.
Because how do you know how many keys were given out from the original owner, right? Maybe they had somebody that came and did, handyman work, or maybe they had somebody that came and did cleaning, and maybe they just gave it to the babysitter or whatever. You don't know how many keys are out there. So most people, when you buy a new house, will change the key. And so it's not really that different than the modern world. But yes, I knew that would get a laugh. All right, onward.
He has sold a permanent mortar, but not a movable one.
Right, so this is a mortar is a grinding thing, right? So if it's built in, then you've bought it. If it is detachable, you have not bought it. Onward.
He has sold the convex millstone, the lower usually fixed one, but not the concave one.
Right, so millstones are usually there's one piece like this, and then there's one piece like that. This one you buy, this one is gone, right? Because this one is heavy and set in one place and it doesn't move. The top one, yeah, that's movable property, right? It's not attached to the house.
Nor has he sold the oven or the stove.
Now, again, in the modern world, we think of ovens and stoves as being built-in appliances. These were not built-in appliances in the ancient world. You made your own oven, you made your own stove usually, or you got maybe somebody in the neighborhood, but they would be used and then replaced, and it was not unusual to get new ones.
Are they comparable to grills?
Yeah, you call it like a barbecue in the modern world. Yeah, that'd be at least in terms of the portability and in terms of it's not part of the house, right? If I'm visiting a house to buy it and they've got a beautiful barbecue that is on wheels in the backyard patio, when I buy the house, that barbecue is going. However, if the barbecue was built in a giant brick enclosure, that barbecue better be there when I get
That's my dream.
there. Spoken like a Latin American.
Yeah, in every house you have a Uruguay one
Yeah.
like that.
My rabbi from when I was growing up, Rabbi Kopikas from Argentina, he was a barbecue master.
But if he had said, I'm selling to you the house and all that is in it, these are also sold.
The magic words. Right, here's our magic words. I'm selling you the house and everything in it. Boom. Now it's all going with the sale, right? Now it's clear. When I said just house, it could be easily thought I'd only meant the living space. If I say the house and everything in it, or the house and everything attached to it, or the house and everything else on the property, then now everything else is being included. And now we don't have an argument. Make sense? Okay, you probably have a higher price though. All right, so that's the end of 4.3. 4.4 is on the same page. I'm trying to save paper. When they fit on the same page, I do. So 4.4 is at the bottom of that same page. Michelle, would you mind?
If a man sold a courtyard, he has sold its houses, cisterns, trenches, and caves, but not the movable property.
Okay, so
Makes sense.
now we're
Yeah.
up. What do you call it? Expanding our view, right? Rather than buying just one house, we've now got a whole courtyard of houses. And when someone says, I'm going to sell my courtyard, what does that mean? It means all the courtyard buildings, but not the property in the buildings, right? So the bed inside and
The
the
area. You're buying the area, like today. The area of the land and whatever is over it.
but whatever is attached to it,
Yeah.
right? The movable
Like
property,
today, exactly.
the bed, the sofa, the clothes in the closets, and whatever else, that goes when I sell it. right? That goes with me. Make sense? Okay.
It's like today.
Yeah, that's the same nowadays.
Yes.
What's the difference between this and when you bought the area before, though, with the courtyard?
So here you're actually, the courtyard, at least by the sage's definition, is the entire structure that is built around and therefore everything attached to it. It is considered to be, this is by usage, the broader definition. Right? A house can be defined and was regularly defined as just a living space. They felt a courtyard was defined as the larger conglomeration of structures.
But when it was talking about the path to the cistern, it seemed to be that the person who owned the house owned the property that the cistern was on. Which
Correct.
Is, here it seems like the person who's buying the courtyard
Right.
owns the property. Basically, it seems like the cistern's
Right. They
on
are,
the buyer's
right.
property in both cases.
because real estate is treated differently than movable property. So they are definitely, but the question in courtyard isn't the real estate. The question is, what about the additional structures?
right.
And
What-
here the distinction is the additional structures are assumed to be in the term courtyard, but in the term house, you don't assume that additional structures are included in the word house.
Why is it that assumption? Is that just the modern term usage? of the
House
term?
means living space, court means broad area of all structures.
But it seemed like you owned the area that the courtyard was on because you had to buy your path to the cistern.
But again, it's just the definition of house versus courtyard. Right? House is living space, and that does not imply other structures. Courtyard isn't living space. Courtyard is space plus all buildings on it, if you read it in this same way. However, there are a few things that are not included.
But if he had said it and all that is in it, all of these are also sold.
Right? So if I say I'm selling the courtyard and everything in it, then the bed, the clothes in the closets, everything else in the courtyard and all of its buildings are sold in the whole deal. However,
But in either case, has he sold the bathhouse or the olive press that are in it?
those were considered to be not attached to a courtyard, right? A courtyard did not include a bathhouse. You might have a bathhouse in a courtyard, but the bathhouse wasn't part of the courtyard unless you say, I am selling the courtyard and all that's in it and the bath and all that's in it, right? You would have to add that as a separate clause to the sale.
But you didn't have any problem to include it if you said the backyard, the cistern, and the store and everything. So what's different between cistern and store and the bathhouse?
The bathhouse and the olive press are not considered intrinsic to the courtyard.
What is business considered business?
I suppose, yeah, they're just not considered to be intrinsic to it. Now, again, this is usage and definitions of 2,000 years ago of what they looked at and said, this is a courtyard, but that isn't. And what we look at might feel a little bit different, but that is the definitions that they use. Now,
No, if he's, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, now Rabbi Eliezer has a very different take on this, but go ahead. And
If you sell with everything, including the cloth, they can say, oh, so all the cloth that are there is mine now. If you sell
with everything, all the
including
movable
cloth,
property inside
everything,
right? Movable property includes everything.
including your wife or your daughter.
No, those are human beings. However, we will talk about buying slaves well, maybe tonight. So there is the question of selling slaves. But let's say, for example, if you say, I'm selling all of this and everything that's in it, and the guy looks and he sees that there is a very expensive necklace sitting in one of the rooms, you've sold that necklace. Maybe you didn't think about it, but if you said everything in it, that goes too.
If you are fast enough to take inventory, everything's there.
Okay.
Because
So
you know this one or the other.
But see, the very simple thing is if I'm buying the courtyard and everything in it, and I give you the money, I show you the door. You don't have time to move out. You're not moving anything out. What would you move? You've just sold me everything. All right. Once we make the deal, get off my property.
So how fast we need to close the deal?
Well, the deal's closed very quickly. I mean, they're
Like at the same moment.
Oh, yeah.
Hereby.
Yeah. I mean, the person could sit there and say, maybe yes, maybe no. But once the money's exchanged, once the symbol of the deal has been taken and done, the kinyan, it's my property now. Yeah, get off. Leave your shoes. No, just kidding. All right, but Rebbe Eliezer, I just love his comment as well.
Rabbi Eliezer says if a man sold the courtyard, he has sold only the air, the open spaces of the courtyard.
Okay, what does a courtyard mean? All right, again, this is getting back into these great philosophical definitional term issues. All right, is a courtyard the whole set of structures, or is a courtyard the literally minimalistic, narrow-minded definition of the actual empty space between all the buildings? If you were in your house and you say, I'm going out in the courtyard, you don't mean I'm going into the other buildings. You mean I'm stepping outside into the empty space. So Rabbi Eliezer says, when you say I'm selling the courtyard, what you're actually selling is empty air. You're just selling the empty space of the courtyard. If you want to sell the buildings, you have to say I'm selling these buildings around the courtyard.
Yeah, because the courtyard is not yours.
Well, no, people could own the whole courtyard. I mean, if you were wealthy, you could own the entire section. And often, remember, I don't think I mentioned this, but courtyards could often be inhabited by multi-generations of the same family. So that because I built my house here, and then I built a house for my son, and then we built a thing for my grandkids and my cousins, and so maybe I own all the property, but I let them all live here, and now I want to sell and move to Florida. So and sell the whole structure, and they can go find a house somewhere else, or maybe I sell it to one of my relatives. So it was possible for a person to own the entire group of buildings, and that's what's being discussed here. But Rabbi Eliezer loses, of course. Courtyard for most people means the collection of buildings, not just the empty area between them. Okay, I think we have time for at least one more, because these are quite short. 4 or 5. Excuse me, let me just double check that's not a technical problem. Nope. If a man If a man sold,
Oh, okay. Yeah. If a man sold an olive press, he has sold also the vat, the grindstone, and the post. But he has not sold the pressing board, the wheel, or the beam.
okay, so basically there is the attached and the not attached. So an olive press, we'll use that picture, right? You have the basic structure of the olive press. You put the olives in here, and then there would be a vat for the olive oil that would come out of it. And what else did we say here? We also have the posts that are attached to the press. Those are all sold when you say I'm selling you the olive stuff or the olive press. But the wheel that you would use to press down on and the planks that you would put to press down with, those are movable, right? Those are not part of the olive press. That's detachable. So if I sell you the olive press, I can take all of that with me when I go. How do I avoid that?
But if he had said, it and all that that is in it, all these are sold also.
Right? So you can also just say, I'm selling you the olive press and everything that's connected and in it. Then I'm selling you a full olive press, not half of an olive press. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees.
Rabbi Eliezer said, if a man sold an olive press, he has sold the beam also.
Right? Because the beam, which is the main part that's used for the leverage to push down on, it might not be attached, but if you don't have a beam, you don't have a press. He loses.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, he loses. Because technically it is a detached and therefore movable piece of property. And therefore you have to specify that that's part of the deal.
Yeah, but if you buy something to produce because it's for production, it's not for decoration, you need every
Yes,
part.
it's not just your backyard, I want to
Yes,
have an olive
exactly.
press. Yeah.
So you need every part of the system in order to make that work. So if I buy the system of production, must be everything.
So say that.
That's really that narrow mind.
Ridiculous.
Very
It's-
narrow mind.
Okay, so every time you say narrow-minded, I say being careful, right? Because yes, there are ways we could define this. And indeed, in the modern world, we might have a slightly different definition of what counts as attached and not attached to a particular item and for its use, right? Is the spare tire part of the car or not part of the car when I go to buy the car? Right? That kind of question. But in their day, they were trying to be as careful as they could to say, look, this is the word you said. And if that's the word you said, words have meanings. And this particular word means a piece of property, not things that are used with the piece of property. If you'd wanted those things too, they should have also been said. They're not trying to trick people. They're not trying to be nitpicky and silly. They're trying to make people aware of the importance of their words. And they're trying to make the judges, who are the main people reading the Mishnah, aware of listening precisely to what people are saying. Now, if you think this sounds silly, and if you think it sounds a little pedantic, you're a little right. But this is actually very good training for having conversations with other people. I don't mean saying, we said see me for lunch, but you didn't say at what time. And I don't mean that kind of silliness. But I mean, when someone says something, how was work? Work could have been better. What does that mean? You should be asking yourself, not just, we've talked, but you should be asking, what are they trying to tell me about how the work actually went? Are they asking me, do they want me to then continue this conversation? Are they telling me to stop the conversation? Do they want me to follow up because we had a conversation yesterday? Do I know that that every word has meaning in a human interaction? These are meanings about buying and selling, but the rabbis wanted us to be listening to each other's words all the time as though each word had significance. Now, did that mean everybody spoke that way? Not always. The rabbis wanted people to speak so that all their words had meaning, but they also wanted us to treat the words that came out of other people as having meaning.
Yeah, but you're punishing at the end the common person,
No.
common people, because not everyone we are human, and not only you don't have everyone the education.
Oh, yes.
Okay, but to do this, but also you can forget, and at the moment in the transaction, you know how many people do mistakes still today with all the contracts in any real estate transaction?
No, I
A
don't.
lot.
Is it really that common still?
Yeah, because we are human, and at the moment you forget something, oops, and now, hey, you remember that? I want this part or the other. So we are human, and when you are playing that the little thing here.
So like I said, the rabbis...
Don't bring goodwill in the society.
But either words mean something or they don't. And who makes that decision? I didn't really mean it when I said I sold everything in the house, because of course I didn't mean I was selling my car, right? And the person who bought it thought, but I wouldn't have bought it without the car. I thought that was part of the deal, right? I thought the boat came with the house. Like imagine you're buying a house with a dock that has a boat attached to it. And you say, we're selling everything, the whole house, everything in it, right? And somebody says, so that means I get to buy the boat. Cool, I've always wanted a boat, right? And the person selling the house thinks, well, the boat's not part of the house. So the guy shows up and the boat's gone. And now everything goes, in an argument and a fight. Because words either mean something or they don't mean anything. And if they don't mean anything, then that means you have to constantly rely on a judicial interpretation, which causes more trouble than saying they mean what they mean. And then the judges will work on it beyond that. But that means just say what you actually mean. And if you want to say, so you mean the boat too? Or I'm selling the whole house, not the boat. Using more words doesn't hurt you.
Never assume.
What? Never assume. Exactly. Make it clear. Make it clear. Right? And again, that goes for relationships too. Right? You just don't assume that you know what the other person means. Don't assume that that you can interpret their word correctly. Say it. If you would like me to be on record saying, don't assume what the other person means, but actually say, every time I see one of those sitcoms or movies where it's all, you'd know what was bothering me if you really cared. It's like, what a stupid thing to say, right? No, I'll know what's bothering you if you tell me what's bothering you. And then I will listen carefully, and then I will try to respond appropriately. But you talk to me, I talk to you, we use words that actually mean things, then we have a real communication and we have a real life together. But if it's all about guessing and interpreting, then who gets to interpret? And in most relationships, of course, it's each person's interpreting it, and then you end up with all of the conflict.
Sounds like the process of psychotherapy.
You know, I having never been through the idea that words have meaning and you should say what you actually mean, and that actually makes a difference, then it's not bad that modern, Western science caught up to it eventually.
And the therapy comes when the therapist asks the patient, what did you mean by that?
Right. And then
the patient has to think about what he meant by it.
Right.
And then
Well, I call this free meal for a therapist.
some people don't have somebody to talk to.
Exactly right. If you don't have a friend, you have to make a friend. That's what Pirkei Avot says. And if you have a friend that you can talk to about these things, who's willing to say, wait, is that really what you said to your spouse? Right? Then that's a good friend. But a lot of people don't have friends like that, and they have to hire a friend that's willing to listen and help them think about what they're saying. The other thing we call all of this, when someone does it on a big scale, is, of course, philosopher. Right? A big part of philosophy is figuring out what people mean when they say different things and what the words actually refer to. I was just listening to another version of Socrates' life, and the thing he got in trouble for was asking people constantly, what do you mean by justice? What do you mean by right? What do you mean by
It was
wrong?
very annoying.
And most people get annoyed by that because they don't want to actually think about it. They'll think about it maybe for their house. Well, and they don't even go through they won't even have their own interpretation that is strong enough for them to be consistent with, right? What most people mean when they say what is good is what I feel like right now, right? They're not even consistent beyond that. So yeah, it's we've got a little bit far off field, but words matter. And the Mishnah in the buying and selling wants us to remember that, because buying a house is a very complicated thing. I think people still consider it to be probably the most complicated large purchase you will ever make in your entire life. And yet people still make mistakes, as Natan mentioned. All right. I will see you all. Well, hopefully I'll see you soon. But as far as the class goes, January 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, you can keep the copy, but please bring it back when we come together again so we can finish up.
Rabbi, can you do the arrangement for Sunday? No.